Thanks so much for joining us. My name is Elaine Howard Ecklund, and I'm the author of Why Science and Faith Need Each Other, 8 Shared Values That Move Us Beyond Fear, which is published by Brazos Press. I have the privilege today of being joined by Reverend Dr. Nichole Phillips, who is a professor of sociology of religion at Emory University, in addition, of course, to being an ordained minister. Nichole told me that she has some questions about the virtue of shalom, which I talk about in the book.
Absolutely.
Welcome, Nichole. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for, first of all, thank you for writing a very compelling book. And I wanted to, before I even asked about shalom, I really think that your book is timely, given that we are in the midst of COVID-19.
Yes.
Even though people might not connect faith and science, here you have a book that is connecting both faith and science and how they can support one another. And it was so compelling how you started your book with what happened with your daughter, Anika?
Yes, Annika, yes.
Annika, right, Annika. And so usually when we think about faith and science, and given the different ways in which faith and science is emerging in public space during this time, tell us why this book? Why now? And why is it important for us to understand that faith and science can support one another versus often the way it's presented, or both subjects and disciplines are presented as being in conflict?
Yeah.
With
Oh
one
gosh,
another?
thank you for that question. I've been thinking about that a lot because, of course, in this moment, everyone, as a result of COVID-19, is experiencing some kind of suffering, and you wonder, as a writer and as a professor, like what you can do in the world to start alleviating some of that suffering. And it's my hope that the faith community and science communities will really join together in ways that they haven't before. Sadly, we've really seen a lack of civil dialogue between scientific communities and faith communities in the public sphere. These communities in most recent years have really been at each other in very negative ways often. At least that's the story that's told. And I think if we don't cooperate right now, it really, we will be so sorry and so regretful decades down the road that we didn't. We need, especially for scientists who are persons of faith, especially scientists who are Christians, which is the largest religious tradition in the U.S., to step up to the plate. I hope that their pastors are affirming them and helping them understand how they have a potentially a special call right now. The word shalom is an interesting word because, of course, it's it comes from both the Jewish tradition initially and now in the Christian tradition, and means to seek peace and wholeness for the world. And I can't imagine a time like this when that's any more important. The COVID-19 time means that seeking peace and wholeness for the world, both to eradicate this horrible disease, but also to use our best talents to deal with the horrific inequalities which have only deepened as a result of the collateral impact of the disease.
Mm-hmm. And so you do bring up what you identify as a virtue, some would say a value, shalom, that is represented in both scientific as well as religious communities. Now, you point that out, but that doesn't come naturally for many people, because shalom, so yes, I'm a social scientist of religion. I am a religious scholar who uses the social sciences to advance religious thinking, humanistic thinking, and I see the value of the social sciences supporting the humanities. So I see the value of understanding shalom as a virtue or a value that's represented both in the scientific community and in the religion community, or amongst scholars or amongst lay people. But it doesn't come naturally to use shalom, which is more understood as a religious term, as a scientific term. So how is that? How?
Yeah, I would say it didn't come naturally to me either. It was
Okay.
only when I sat down to think about, what's my message to the Christian community, when the work I've been doing as a social scientist for the past 15 years, studying, what scientists think about faith and what people of faith think about religion. And I started to look at some of the interviews that I've done with scientists who are Christians. And I really learned from them. Some of them have thought very deeply about the ways in which their work as scientists brings wholeness and peace to the world, especially through eliminating or lessening suffering for others. Often we think of the value of shalom as having a Zen attitude or something,
Right.
just sort of, calm, like internal calm. I don't mean to pick fun of that, but sort of an internal calm for myself. It almost in some ways becomes rather self-focused. But I do think that we see some in the science community taking this value of shalom very much outside of themselves and saying, really my reason for doing my work in part is to help others experience wholeness, to help the environment, to really bring about a sense of justice and wholeness to the environment through using my scientific work to figure out how we can care for the environment better, to lessen inequality through providing better access to medical care for people, providing, in the end of the day, lower cost drugs for people. And then another thing which came out a lot among the scientists, especially our Black and brown scientists or people of color, is that they talked a lot about underrepresentation in science, and even marginalization of Black and brown people in science, of women in science, of all races really, and how for them seeking shalom for the world meant opening up space, being on mission really to open up space to make sure that these voices come to the table, and not just sort of allowing them to squeak in, but really welcoming them as needed voices. And I think we see that in this COVID-19 period, that we want more scientists of color speaking in very public ways about what's happening, because of course their voice is so needed now more than ever.
Mm-hmm. And so when you speak about shalom in the chapter in the book, you also connect it to this idea of justice. And in your answers that you've delivered for the last two questions, I hear it explicitly, but more so implicitly. And so I want to bring in, since you're connecting faith and science and you're using particular human virtues to do so, what about religious communities and faith communities? How does that look to center, or how does their work look when we're thinking about shalom and shalom with respect to this connection to justice and representing the connection between faith and science? Do you
I
get the
do.
question?
That's a complicated and very deep question.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll give kind of just in my initial thinking on it
Mm-hmm.
here. I think faith communities need to think about shalom in part as a practice, not just an idea. And what that might mean with relationship to faith and science is if we're having a conversation on science in a faith community, let's think about what voices we want there. So let's practice wholeness for the world by representing various kinds of people when we have a conversation about faith and science, right? So we know, for example, that Black women are incredibly underrepresented in certain disciplines of science. And so what would it mean then if there are Black women scientists in our midst, in our church community, to honor them by elevating their voice and having our faith community be at the leading edge of seeking that kind of justice, which will lead to peace in the world more broadly, which will lead to shalom in the world more broadly. Because of course we know that people who come from different backgrounds and social locations have insight into the problems of particular science that will really allow them to give something very special and incredible that will serve a broader set of people. And so what would it mean for us to practice inclusion as a way of bringing out shalom? I'd love for church communities to be known for that. Sadly, sometimes they're not known for that, but I do see there is some hope, some very real hope of them moving forward in that way. Yeah.
Well, we have in such a short period of time expended our time together. However, I love your text because it's not just for academics. It's accessible, and it is a text that can be used for religious communities who are trying to work through the relationship between faith and science. And so I thank you for the opportunity to have taken this time to talk about your text during this period, as well as how you understand it relating to shalom and justice issues. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. It's been such an honor for me to be in dialogue with you. Really appreciate you. Thank you.